be kind enough? Would you be kind enough just to give us your name and perhaps where you're hailing from? Take about 5 seconds or so. This is your first or second time here?
Roslyn from Toronto, Canada.
Good evening, Roslyn. Thank you for being here.
Good
Appreciate
evening.
it.
Yeah.
Okay,
Mhm.
thank you.
I'm Faye from New York.
Hi, Faye. Welcome. Nice to have you.
Hi, I am Arlene from Georgia.
Oh, hi, Arlene. So you're living close to me, probably. Okay.
Camille from Georgia.
Hi, Camille. Any more first or second timers?
Winoma from Miami.
Welcome, Renoma. Welcome. Glad to have you. Welcome.
Rona from Orlando.
Welcome, Orlando. Orlando's in the house. And I'm asking some of our regular attendees just to give a special welcome to all of these realtors in the chat, and hopefully they will become regular attendees as well. All right, so some more folks will be coming on pretty soon, but we want to get this thing rolling. So this evening, we are doing a part 2. Last week, we did the healing crisis of the body, healing from diseases. And this evening, a friend of mine kind of spurred me or encouraged me to do this. So this is part 2 of the healing crisis. But today we want to talk about navigating the emotional healing crises, navigating the emotional healing crises. Before we start, as we always do, I just want to promise you 2 things and give you 2 promises. The first thing is I want you to take notes. So get a writing instrument and paper and take notes, because the shortest pencil is longer than the longest memory. The shortest pencil is longer than the longest memory. The second thing I want you to do is to stay away from the 5 worst words in the world. And those words are, I have heard that before. Those words create closed-mindedness instead of open-mindedness. So I gave you the first 2 things. Now the 2 promises. Promise number 1 is that you will learn something today that you can use right away. Promise number 2, I'm available to work with you further on an individual basis. And at the end of the presentation, you will get my information to contact me in the chat. We also have our disclaimer, a general disclaimer. This information provided in this presentation is intended for general informational purposes only and should not be considered as a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. As a naturopathic doctor, I am sharing insights and suggestions based on my expertise in natural health and wellness. However, it's important to consult with a medical doctor before making any significant changes to your health regimen, especially if you have underlying medical conditions, are taking medications, or have specific health concerns. So for those of you who are new, I'm a naturopathic doctor. I'm also trained in therapy. I'm a certified family and marriage and family pastoral therapist, an anger resolution therapist. I hold a PhD in psychology with an emphasis in organizational psychology. So I have some idea of what we're going to talk about this evening. If you have any questions, I invite you to write them down. At the end of the presentation, we have a question and answer session. But if the question is pertinent to the particular slide and you need to get answered, then we would certainly endeavor to answer your questions by God's grace. All right. So emotional healing crises are pivotal moments in our lives. And this is where we confront and navigate intense emotions that could lead to personal growth and well-being. emotional healing is crucial. It's important because it has an impact on your mental health, your resilience, and your overall life satisfaction. Research shows that emotional well-being is intricately connected to your physical health. Emotional stress can manifest itself as physical symptoms, and conversely, physical well-being can positively be impacted, and this can impact your emotional state. So this presentation would seek to explore key aspects of emotional healing crises and their impact on your overall well-being. So you want to nurture the mind-body connection. So to understand emotional crises, we are saying that an emotional healing crisis is or can be or should be a transformative moment in your life marked by heightened emotional intensity and self-reflection. During the crisis, you may be compelled to reevaluate your beliefs, to confront deep-seated emotions, and ultimately experience significant personal growth. These crises also play a pivotal role in building resilience as you learn to adapt, you learn to cope with challenges, and you develop a greater capacity to navigate life's ups and downs. We want to look at some real world scenarios, and I may ask a couple of questions here, so get ready to jump in if I ask a couple of questions. So let's look at the first one. So the first scenario is overcoming a personal loss, and I'm sure probably all of us here tonight, all 21 of us, have experienced some kind of personal loss. Last week, my wife suffered a personal loss with the death of her aunt in New York. This aunt also raised her as a child for a number of years, right? So she has suffered a personal loss. How can you overcome a personal loss? Because as we go through life, somebody is actually now coming out of a personal loss. Somebody is in dealing with a personal loss, or somebody is about to deal with a personal loss. So it's a part of life. So how do we deal with it? How do we overcome a personal loss? So here we have a little scenario. Sarah experienced a profound emotional healing crisis after the loss or the death of a loved one. Excuse me. The intense grief led her to confront her emotions, to seek support, and eventually find new meaning in her life. Through this crisis, Sarah developed resilience. She learned coping mechanisms and established stronger connections with others. Now, on last week, and the recording should be on our YouTube channel. You can just type in the name of the company, H.E.A.L Lifestyle Academy, LLC, and go to our YouTube channel. Last week, we talked about the healing crisis of the body, and we talked briefly about dealing with loss, right? Whether it's a job loss, the loss of a marriage, loss of a loved one, whatever loss you may be experiencing or may have experienced, you will want to understand the emotional roller coaster that you might be going through. And we gave an acronym last week. And if my wife could put it in the chat, the acronym of DABDA, D-A-B-D-A, DABDA. And the first D in this acronym, dealing with stress and grief, stands for denial, right? A lot of times, especially if we experience a personal loss, we are in denial. We just can't come to grips to reality with what has happened, what is taking place. We have been caught unawares. However, if you're a Christian, you know that God is never taken by surprise, right? So that's a good thing that we have. Nothing comes by surprise. He knows everything. And if the truth be told, he has been preparing us, unbeknown to us, to deal with this personal loss. So the first D we said is denial. We normally deny a certain loss that we have experienced. The brain just can't seem to deal with the reality. Sometimes we faint away, sometimes we get sick, we go through a lot of physiological changes. So the first D is denial. The A is for anger. Anger. So the anger comes on because we did not expect this loss. And it comes on because partially we kind of want to believe it, and that small amount of belief turns to anger, and we might even blame God, might blame ourselves, and we go through that stage of anger. So denial, the A is for anger. The B is for bargaining. Bargaining, right? We try to bargain. We say, no, Lord, please, don't let this happen. You're dreaming that it's a dream. It's not reality. And it make God promises if he would reverse the situation. So we have denial, we have anger, we have bargaining. The next D stands for depression. Now, all of us, if we suffer a personal loss, have gone through some stage or amount of depression. In our daily lives, we have stressors that can cause us to be slightly depressed. If you find yourself, after suffering some kind of personal loss, being depressed for more than 2 weeks, then you need to get some kind of therapeutic care, because that could lead to liquid being put into you to bring it back to balance. Okay. And you don't want to get there. So you don't want to live, you live probably in the state of Florida or the state of Georgia. You don't want to live in a state of depression. That's when the chemicals get involved to balance your mind. So we have the D for denial, the A for anger, the B for bargaining, the next D for depression, and the last A is acceptance. So those 5 stages can come in any way. You might, first of all, accept the personal loss. Then the next moment you will deny accepting it. Then you get angry. And so the idea is to be knowledgeable, to be aware of these 5 particular stages that you might be in right now, you might be matriculating, or you might meet at some point in the future. If you're going through a personal loss, you need to know, why am I so angry for this small thing that happened that I'm not normally angry about? Why am I screaming at my wife or my kid? Why am I banging the car door? Why am I kicking the dog? You have to be aware of the stages. Everyone goes through grief or personal loss in a different way. And based on your walk with God, based on what you've gone through in life, you will come out of it faster or slower. But the idea is to walk, like David said, do I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. David is not staying in the valley of the shadow of death, because life does not stop while you are grieving. And so as soon as possible, you want to get back into the normal phase of your life while you are going through the grieving process. You want to get back as quick as possible to the normal state, right? That just a quick talk on that. All right, let's continue. So that was the first scenario. Scenario number 2, let's go over again briefly. Overcoming a personal loss. We talk about Sarah, what she went through, but through the process, she developed resilience. She learned coping mechanisms and established stronger connections with others. In other words, when something happens, it's best not to say that this happened to me. When you do that, you make yourself a victim, right? This has happened. And how do I deal with this? Because the truth be told, somebody else has something worse off than you might have, that I might have. But it's huge to us. So nobody can take that from you. but you want to, as soon as possible, if you're a Christian, give that pain, that loss to God and let him heal your mind. Find yourself in his word, meditate upon the Psalms in a quiet place, listen to nice soft music, a waterfall perhaps. You want to get yourself back to a place where the Holy Spirit can lead you out of the valley of the shadow of death, right? Most of us have gone to a park of some sort, and there might be a statue in the park. And on the statue, a lot of times, you're going to see pigeons. And sometimes the pigeons are pooping on the statue, right? And so we can use that to say, some days you might be the statue where all the pigeons of life are pooping on you. And some days you might be the pigeons, right? You might be the pigeons. All right. Does somebody have the hand up? Or that's my hand? Okay. Why is my hand up? Okay, let me put my hand up. Okay, wonderful. All right, let's move on. Scenario number 2, a career transition challenge. So James faced an emotional healing crisis when he was navigating a challenging career transition. The uncertainty and doubt propelled him to reassess his goals, leading to personal and professional growth. So again, we are saying we all face challenges. Here is James facing a career transition challenge, right? He faced this emotional healing crisis when he was going through the career transition. The uncertainty and the self-doubt propelled him to reassess his goals, sit down and reflect. And that led to personal and professional growth. James embraced the change. He developed new skills, and ultimately he found fulfillment in a career aligned with his passion. In other words, when something happens for the Christian, it normally means it happened for a purpose. Romans 8:20. All things work together for good to them that love the Lord and are called according to his purpose. A Christian author, James Allen, said, individuals are anxious to change their circumstances, but they are unwilling to change themselves. They therefore remain bound. Have you ever felt bound in your life? You've gone through a personal loss or probably a career transition challenge, and you feel bound. You freeze through fear, or you have paralysis of analysis, and you're not going anywhere. When life happens, we have to deal with life, or life will deal with us, right? And that's why we need to have a support structure. All right. So we're saying that, we have to recognize our emotional triggers. We all have emotional triggers. A trigger is anything that sets you off emotionally and activates your memories of your trauma. It's particular to you and what your experience has been. Right? So you can be triggered and you can revert to the feelings and behaviors that you had in the traumatizing situation. So I missed something there. All right. So we need to have awareness of our particular emotional triggers. It's very important. It's a crucial step in managing our emotions effectively. Let's deal with criticism. Now, imagine a scenario where a project that you worked on receives criticism. Okay, so now I'll ask anybody who wants to volunteer. Has anybody here worked on a project of some sort? You worked hard on the project, but you still received criticism. Anybody want to volunteer? Anyone? Nobody? You might need to unmute. Okay, so nobody. Okay. All right. So the question would have been asked, if you had faced some type of criticism for a task, a project you completed that was very hard, how did it make you feel? And based on your feelings, this could be a sign that criticism is one of your emotional triggers. So the definition of criticism is feedback or judgment about your actions, your appearance, or ideas that may evoke feelings of inadequacy or self-doubt. The impact criticism can make you question your worth and your abilities. It's like a spotlight on perceived shortcomings that triggers defensive emotions. What about rejection? Rejection is defined as being excluded or dismissed, leading to feelings of sadness, loneliness, or a sense of unworthiness. The impact: rejection can feel like a punch to the gut, creating a deep sense of isolation and a yearning for acceptance and connection. All right, I want you to identify any of these. At the end, we'll talk about it. What about failure? Failure. John Maxwell, a very popular author, has written a book called Failing Forward. I'm not sure how many times you've heard that. Failing Forward. And what failing forward means is that you're not a failure until you have stopped trying. You might fail at doing something, but you're not a failure until you have stopped trying. Somebody says that success is failure turned inside out. Success is really failure turned inside out. And this gentleman, trying to remember his name, that developed the filament for the light bulb. And his name is on my mind, it's just coming on my tongue. He developed the filament for the light bulb. And when he finally developed it, he was interviewed. And one reporter asked him, how do you feel having failed for so many times, almost 1,000 times, you failed to make this filament? Do you feel like a failure? And his response was no. Thomas Edison, his response was no. I don't think I was a failure 999 times. I just found 999 ways that it didn't work. And if he had stopped trying at the 999 time, he wouldn't have succeeded with the filament at the 1,000th try. All right, so many of us have faced failings in life, and we have stopped trying because we begin to talk to ourselves and say that we are a failure. Now, a personal testimony, I'm not trying to speak ill of my mother. She's deceased, she's dead. But growing up, because of the bad marriage she had with my father, and having been married previously with 3 other children, my mother would say that my sisters and I, between 2 girls, the last one died, that we, the Rayborns, would never amount to anything. And for a long time, I believed what my mother said, because I loved my mother. I didn't think she would lie on me. And I believed what she said for a long time. And I really failed in so many ways. I failed so much that I went to college at the age of 29. And I went at the age of 29 because I began to realize that success is failure turned inside out. If you would read the biography of many people in the world that you admire, you would find that their success stemmed from many times where they failed, but they failed forward. They never stopped trying. That's for somebody this evening. I just want to give you a word of encouragement. Helen Keller said, a bend in the road is not the end of the road. John Maxwell added to that statement. He said, a bend in the road is not the end of the road unless you forget to make the turn. I added to both of those statements, and I said, a bend in the road is not the end of the road unless you forget to make the turn, and there are always lessons to be learned. Always. Every time we fail, if we would look at it from the point of view, what is the teaching point here? What can I take away from this? You would never be a failure, a failure, a failure. All right. So the definition of failing or failure is falling short of expectations or goals, which causes frustration, disappointment, or a blow to your self-confidence. Failure can feel like a setback, impacting your belief in yourself. Overcoming it involves resilience and learning from the experience. Sometimes we have what we call roadblocks in our path. And if you look at it in the right frame of mind, a roadblock could be a stepping stone. Quick story. This gentleman had a donkey that he claimed to love dearly, claimed to love a donkey dearly. And one day he did something and he accidentally hit the donkey, and the donkey kicked him out of reflex. And this man was so angry that he dug a deep hole and he threw the donkey down in the hole. He said, you know what? I'm not going to feed you. You're going to sit until you die. And the donkey was in the hole for a couple of days, no food. Then the man began to throw dirt on the donkey. And he began to ee-haw, 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 feel sorry for himself. And then when he was almost completely covered, a thought came to him. Why am I lying down here, allowing this man to throw dirt and garbage on me? This is not helping me. I'm still alive. So the donkey got up and he shook the dirt on the garbage off, and he just stomped on it. And he realized that the more dirt and garbage that the man threw in the hole, when he stepped aside and it fell on the ground, he would stomp on it. And eventually, the man threw so much dirt and so much garbage in the hole that the donkey was able to walk out of the hole. That's for somebody this evening. There is nothing, the Bible says, if you're a Christian, no weapon formed against you shall prosper. That's the word of God. All right, change. We talked before about James Allen. Many of us want change. We want to change our circumstances, but we don't want to change ourselves. Can I suggest to you that if you take a pig out of the mud, you clean the pig, you shampoo the pig, you spray the most expensive cologne or perfume on the pig, you put a bow around its neck, you put the pig in high heels, put the pig in a dress, you put Q-Tech nail polish on the pig. The first rain that falls or the first puddle that pig finds, he would jump into. Why? Because you change the pig's circumstance, but you never change the pig. And many of us, we want to change, ask God to change our circumstance, but we don't want to change. Yeah? All right. So the definition of change is the introduction of something new or something different that provokes anxiety, fear, or resistance. I'm sure if I ask for a show of hands, how many of us are afraid of change? Those who are honest, many hands would go up. Many hands would go up. We are afraid of change because it provokes anxiety, it provokes fear, it provokes resistance. If you are going through some type of change today, I want to give you a couple scripture texts to lean upon. Philippians chapter 4, verse 6 and 7 says, don't be anxious for anything, right? But by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, make your request known unto God. And the peace of God, verse 7, shall keep your hearts and mind through Christ Jesus. The second text is 2 Timothy 1:7. For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, of love, and a sound mind. Don't be afraid of change. All right. So change could disrupt the familiar, generating discomfort. Many of us live in Comfortville, right? 1745 Comfortville Lane in the state of comfort. And change disrupts what is familiar to us. It generates discomfort. And whether it's positive or it's negative, it triggers emotions related to uncertainty and a period of adjustment. That's what change does. What about unmet expectations? Unmet expectations. The definition of unmet expectations is disappointment resulting from expectations not being fulfilled that leads to frustration or resentment. I can tell you this evening right now. Think of something that has made you angry today, this evening, yesterday, last year, 5 years ago, and you will trace it back to disappointment. Disappointment leads to frustration. Frustration leads to anger. Anger leads to resentment. Yeah? Unmet expectations can be emotionally jarring. And when we learn to manage expectation, it helps you to navigate the inevitable discrepancies between reality and and anticipation. So it's expectations versus reality. What about conflict? Conflict definition is disagreements or tension between individuals causing emotions such as anger, stress, or sadness. Now, let me say here that conflict comes from the Latin word conflictus, which means to strike together, like striking two stones. If you took up two pieces of rock and struck them together, you're going to see sparks flying, right? That's where the idea came from, right? Somebody's arguing and sparks are flying. There was conflict. Conflict is not necessarily a bad thing. I'm not saying to go and seek conflict, but if you handle conflict in the proper way, you and the other individual will grow. Conflict helps you to see yourself more than you thought you knew yourself, and also to learn the other person if you resolve it in a healthy way, Conflict stirs up strong emotions and can strain your relationships. Effectively addressing conflicts involves emotional intelligence and communication skills. And emotional intelligence basically is talking about being able to be aware of how you feel at a given time. So for my clients who I give coaching for anger management, I tell them before, if you get angry, don't talk. Because most times when we're angry, we say things that we can't take back later on, right? We just want that anger to come out. And when you're in a conflict and you know that you're very angry, it's best to stay quiet, right? Because it stirs up strong emotions and it can eventually strain relationships. Effectively addressing conflicts involves emotional intelligence, being aware that you're angry, being aware that you're sad, you're going through some personal loss. Now is not the best time to get involved in a conflict, All right. So think about instances in your own life where these triggers have played a role. We want to talk now about the process of emotional healing, right? Dr. Lang said, pain in this life is not avoidable. Now, all of us have a pain file. We could go to the back of our mind where we have our pain file, and we could pull out a drawer and have files of pains that we have endured over life. We all know that pain is not avoidable. Once you are alive, you will deal with pain. Then we need to know how to resolve and deal with pain effectively. So Dr. Lang said pain in this life is not avoidable. But the pain we create, avoiding pain, is avoidable. Pain in this life is not avoidable, but the pain we create avoiding pain is avoidable. All right. So we were talking about acknowledgement. It means to recognize and acknowledge that there is emotional pain or distress. Don't live in Egypt. Don't live in denial. Right? Acknowledge that there is emotional pain. The only way you can overcome a bad habit, whether it's smoking or drinking or rage, is acknowledging that I have a challenge. If you don't acknowledge it, you cannot deal with it. All right? So acknowledgement. Now, there is some initial discomfort, as we'll see with the rest of them. And this stage of initial discomfort involves feelings of vulnerability, denial, or reluctance to confront the emotions. But we need to confront them, or they would unexpectedly confront us. What about acceptance? Somebody said that the thing that's hurting today will only hurt worse tomorrow if you don't change something today. Acceptance is embracing and accepting the existence of the emotions that you're experiencing without judgment. In other words, don't beat up yourself if you're faced a personal loss, death of a loved one, and you're a Christian, you believe in God, but you find yourself crying uncontrollably, or you find yourself getting angry. Don't beat up yourself. Acknowledge, accept the fact, hey, right now, I'm in this situation. Lord, you said in Isaiah 1:18, come now, let's reason together. Lord, please give me the victory over this anger. Right? But you first have to accept it. Accept it. Now, the discomfort is that it can be challenging to accept and come to terms with painful emotions, leading to discomfort and resistance. Expression. Finding healthy ways to express and communicate emotions, whether through talking, writing, or creative outlets. We need to find a way to express our hurt, to get the hurt from the subconscious mind to the frontal lobe to a piece of paper. You cannot be objective while all of these thoughts are racing around in your mind. When it's on paper, you can now be objective and look at it, look at the pros and the cons, and try to deal with the situation. The initial discomfort, expressing emotions, can be uncomfortable initially, especially if there is a fear of judgment or a lack of accustomed communication skills. Understanding. Understanding means to gain insight into the root causes and triggers of your emotional pain. The discomfort, the process of self-reflection and understanding may bring up difficult memories or realizations that cause discomfort, all right? Sometimes you might go to the dentist and the dentist would say, or the doctor would be giving you an injection, and they wouldn't use the word pain. They would say, you're going to feel some pressure or you're going to feel some discomfort. But when I'm done, you're going to feel better, right? And we're suggesting here that as you go through these steps, you will experience some discomfort. It's a healing crisis. You might feel worse when you begin to deal with it than when you didn't deal with it. But know that you're walking through the valley of the shadow of death. You don't have a lawn chair. You're going through, you're matriculating. All right. Somebody said that self-reflection is only useful when followed by thoughtful action. Self-reflection is only useful when followed by thoughtful action. So as you begin to contemplate what's happening, don't just stay at that state of contemplation, but taking action. Forgiveness. Wow, this is a huge one. This is huge, right? And the question becomes, how can I forgive when it hurts so much? How can I forgive when it hurts so much? And that's a question that many people ask. They ask me as a therapist, they ask God, they ask pastors, how can I want to forgive, but how can I forgive when it hurts so much? And one of the first ways to be able to forgive is to stop focusing on the pain. Your feelings or your focus determines your feelings. And in Proverbs, the Bible says, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. What you focus on will determine how you feel. So you might still be focusing on the pain that was caused you. Therefore, you are blinded to be able to forgive. Now, I'm not trying to minimize any pain. I have faced a number of situations I had to forgive. At the age of 16, I began to not appreciate my mother as I did before. Growing up, she was my guardian angel. She was an angel in white clothing. And at 16, I saw her as a black angel. And I had reasons for that. But I realized that I couldn't keep all of that pain, all of that stress inside of me because of the toxins, and we spoke about it a couple of weeks ago, all of the toxins that are generated when we hold resentment and unforgiveness against somebody. Let me hasten to say that forgiving somebody is more expressly for you than the person. Because many times people who have done us wrong seem to be unaware of what they have done. And even if they are aware, many times they don't care. And so we are nursing this anger and resentment against them. Our bodies are suffering, so we're suffering twice, and they don't really care. So forgiving is mainly for yourself, but you have to ask God for the ability to forgive that person. We cannot forgive humanly. We need God's help to forgive, right? And so if we try to focus not on the pain and begin to feel a sense of sympathy toward the person who has caused or is causing the pain, our focus would change our feelings, right? So the description of forgiveness is letting go of resentment and forgiving oneself or others for past hurts. Many people are holding on to resentment for somebody who have died many years ago. The worms have taken their bodies and they're still holding on to the pain. May I suggest that we let go? We let go. And I'm telling you, this year I had to go through this again, several situations of major pain caused by individuals who just did not care. And I had to stop and pray and ask God to give me the strength one more time to forgive. And let me hasten to say, I think it was Corrie ten Boom, that Jewish lady who I think she was apparently enslaved in the Jewish camps. She went to a Methodist minister one day because she couldn't forgive somebody. I mean, the person that really hurt her a whole lot. And she couldn't sleep. sometimes. Like some of us, we couldn't sleep, getting all kind of ulcers in the stomach because we allowing somebody else to live for free in our minds. They're not even paying a rent or a mortgage, living for free. And the minister listened to her, and he said, look outside the window. There is a bell tower. And in the tower, there's a huge bell. Attached to the bell is a long rope. And the sexton would normally pull the rope, and the bell would go ding, dong, for as long as the power of the pendulum swung to the side of the bell. Ding, dong, ding, dong, ding, dong. And he said, finally, the bell would stop. He said, that's like your anger. You're the bell. Every time you conjure up this person's image in your mind, or you rehearse the hurt, it's like that bell going ding dong, ding dong, ding dong. He said, stop pulling the rope, and the bell would stop dinging. And eventually, you would be able, by God's grace, to forgive the person. You might not forget the wrong, but you would be so healed that even when you remember the wrong that the person did, you wouldn't say they did it to me as a victim, because you have given it to God. You would feel sorry for them and be able to not be resentful, right? I'm not saying it's easy, but Philippians 4:13 says, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. So letting go of resentment and forgiving oneself or others for past hurts. There are some discomforts. Forgiveness can be challenging, especially if there is deep emotional pain involved. It may take time to release your negative emotions, but I'm advising you, please begin releasing those negative emotions, because they're not doing you any good. That's why God said in the Bible, vengeance is mine. It's a spiritual warning, but it's also a physiological warning, because when we hold anger, when we take revenge, we end up hurting ourselves. All right. Reconstruction. You can be anything. Just be an optimist. Be an optimist. Somebody said, some people are so negative. Some people are so negative that they could walk into a room full of lights, and you could develop, like long ago when you develop a Kodak picture in a dark room. Some people are so negative, they'll walk into a bright room, and immediately you could develop pictures in the room. They're so negative, so dark, right? Be an optimist. Building new perspectives, coping mechanisms, and a positive outlook on life. The same energy I have discovered, I used to be a complainer growing up, because my parents separated when I was 10 years old, living in the same house, not talking to each other. It was an embarrassment to me and my family, my sisters and they growing up. All of our friends' parents were together. Then they got divorced at 16, and they all stopped serving the Lord. And I began to complain, get mad with God. And the more I complained, it was like a magnet for more negative things to happen to me. And then I'll get more angry. And then I'll get more negative things. After a while, I say, hey. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over, expecting a different result. The same energy it takes to complain is the same energy it takes to begin to praise God, begin to tell myself, I'm an overcomer. I went to college at the age of 29 with a GED. God took me through and gave me 2 doctorates. Took me a while longer. So I'm not saying that to impress you, but to impress upon you that God will always give you a testimony after the test that you have gone through. And many times, the testimony that God gives you is for somebody else. It's for somebody else. All right. So building new perspectives, coping mechanisms, and having a positive outlook on life. There is some initial discomfort, creating change and adopting new ways of thinking and behaving can be uncomfortable as it challenges established patterns. What about lessons learned? How can we integrate? Somebody says that experience is the greatest teacher, and I want to disagree and agree with John Maxwell that experience is not the greatest teacher. Examined experience is the greatest teacher, because there are many people who have gone through all sorts of experiences in life and they're still doing the same thing. They haven't learned anything. Or you may have met people who say, I'm doing this job for 40 years. And you look at them and you look at somebody doing the same job for 8 years and you see a vast difference. Do you know why? They have been doing the same job for 5 years, 8 times, because after the 5th year, they did not grow. They just kept compounding what they were doing for 5 years, 8 more times to get 40 years. They never learned from their experience. And the only way we could learn from our examined experience is to reflect. Some people say, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. That's a dangerous statement. First of all, how do you know it's not broken unless you examine it? There might be a crack. If you don't examine it, that crack could eventually come to a damaged whatever it is. We have to sit and reflect. I've been doing this for this length of time. What progress have I made? If a corporation does not have quarterly planning and reflecting, they will soon be out of business, because they have competitors and what they were doing in a certain way may have been outgrown in time. We need to integrate what we have learned, but we can only learn if we examine our experience. So integrate the lessons learned from the healing process into your daily life. It's a gradual process. It's a gradual process. It would not happen in a day, but it could happen daily. Over time, the discomfort diminishes as you incorporate healing insight into your lives, fostering emotional resilience. Maintenance. Sustaining emotional well-being through ongoing self-care, support systems, and healthy habits. With consistent efforts and a supportive environment, you can maintain emotional well-being and continue your progress. All right. Embracing the vulnerability. Many of us are afraid to be vulnerable, even in our personal relationships with our spouses or our children. We are afraid to be vulnerable because chances are somebody might take advantage of us, which is true. But defined vulnerability means involves allowing yourself to be open, to be exposed, and authentic in expressing emotions, and experiences, even in the face of uncertainty or potential discomfort. Vulnerability is a crucial aspect of emotional healing, as it allows you to acknowledge and address your emotions honestly. It creates an environment where healing can take place authentically. Now, let me give a word of caution. Being or embracing vulnerability does not mean that you stay in a place or in a relationship where you're being abused daily, which will cause detriment to you. Vulnerability, like the plant here, is being planted in the ground, knowing that there are wild animals that might come and eat of your leaves. There might be strong winds, but being able to lie down The reason why during a storm or after a storm, you find that there are many big trees, oak trees on the ground, but the small plants are still rooted. And it's because the small plants are flexible. Somebody says, blessed are the flexible, for they shall not be bent out of shape. The plant is flexible and it goes with the wind. The mighty oak says, no, I am big and strong. And it ends up on the ground. All right. So why does vulnerability matter in your healing? Being vulnerable fosters authentic connections with yourself and others. It promotes genuine communication and understanding, which is essential for effective healing. Vulnerability enables you to accept and embrace your true self, including your flaws and imperfections, that leads to greater self-compassion. Now, for some strange reason, and maybe you can help me figure it out, when I was growing up, people around me who call themselves my friends told me I had a big head. All right? For some reason, I never believed them. In fact, they were so insistent that I recognized that I had a big head that they gave me a very affectionate name. They called me the Lollipop Man. The Lollipop Man. And after a while, I began to feel sorry for myself because I had a big head like my father. Then I said, you know what? If I have a bigger head than most people, it must mean I have a bigger brain. How can I put it into motion? And some of my friends whose heads are smaller than mine have not been able to achieve what God has achieved through me with my bigger head. Yeah. So be vulnerable. And, I've come to understand that your worst enemies could be your best friends, in the sense that your enemies are going to hound you down every day. They will tell you everything that's wrong with you. So they will be like your mirror. So what you have to do is don't get uptight. Listen to what your enemy is telling you. Take note of it. Do some introspection. See if what they're saying is true and make necessary changes. If it's not true, put it over your back and keep going. Keep going. Always find a positive outcome. All right. Here are some insights on building emotional resilience. Mr. Button said, a good half of the art of living is resilience. Good half is resilience. Resilience is, or the definition is, emotional resilience refers to your ability to adapt to and bounce back from adversity, from stress, and from challenges. So vulnerability plays a role here. Acknowledging and expressing vulnerability is a key component of building emotional resilience. It allows you to confront challenges, to learn from experiences, and develop coping strategies. Right? So this year, I told my wife, probably, I think it was around June or July, that before the end of the year, I'm going to write at least one book. I just said it, right? And I said it out loud because I told some friends because I wanted them to hold me accountable. And would you know that God gave me 2 cookbooks? They're on Amazon. Then I wrote another book about your personal self and your professional self. And I just finished my 4th book dealing with couples and relationships. It's called CARS, at the acronym CARS, C-A-R-S, couples and relationships. And I'm saying that to say, we have to be vulnerable. I say, Lord, you've given me all of these talents, this knowledge. How do I use it? Because I began to feel sorry for myself not having the job I wanted at the moment. And God said, what is in your hand? Use what I've given you. And that's what we have been doing. We have been on this platform since August 4th. of this year, and God has been blessing. Yeah? Amen. All right. Strategies for embracing vulnerability. Self-reflection. Engage, in self-reflection to understand and accept your emotions. And this can take the form of journaling or other mindfulness practices. A good thing to do, many of us saying that people who write books are so intelligent. If you read some of the books out there, you'll know that that's not true. But don't limit yourself. God gave you a test for a purpose. One good way for therapy is to write out, journal what you have gone through, your experiences, and turn that journal into a book. It might not be New York's #1 bestseller, but I guarantee you that book will touch at least 5 people while you're being healed, getting your therapy and writing it out. Open communication. Foster an environment where open and honest communication is encouraged. This includes expressing feelings to trusted individuals, such as friends, family, or therapists like myself. Overcoming the fear of vulnerability. Overcoming the fear of vulnerability. How can we normalize vulnerability? Vulnerability is a universal human experience. Normalizing vulnerability reduces the fear that is associated with it and encourages you to embrace it as a natural part of your healing journey, Yeah. So I have written a number of songs, some of which you have never heard and may never hear. And I did a CD in 2005. And those songs were written out of periods of deep hurt and pain. And I began to be vulnerable with God. Lord, I'm feeling, and I put the words in song. It was therapeutic. Some people have gotten a free CD. They were very kind and said it sounded good, but I use that as therapy. Yeah. Celebrate courage. Being vulnerable requires courage. Celebrate and acknowledge the bravery it takes to share yourself with others. In conclusion, empowerment. Embracing vulnerability is not a sign of weakness, but it is a source of strength and empowerment in the healing process. Ongoing vulnerability is a means of continued growth, self-discovery, and building resilience over time. All right. So that's the end of our presentation. Let me take off the recording. For those who want to share, give me one moment. Let me stop the recording.